Alright everyone, welcome back. This is Dan Beringer, and today I'm going to be playing a $16 9-man turbo on America's Cardroom. All of my commentary and analysis is made in the game, so you will get a real idea of how I'm making my decisions. Okay, so right now we have King 10 suited under the gun, especially early in the tournament. There's no real need to be raising this. I'm going to fold. Already, it is definitely worth noting that this player, Gopa, raised to 400. Now, we don't know whether he meant to raise to 40 for a min raise or if he's just kind of a crazy player, but it's definitely worth just making note on that fact. Okay, so right now, polarizing, open for a min raise under the gun +1. Then Gopa 3-bet it, and then now it's been 4-bet by Happy 12. So we're obviously going to be folding Queen 10 suited from the big blind, but this is a hand we really want to pay attention to, especially if it gets to showdown, because we're going to get a good idea of the ranges of these players for their opens and their 3-bets and their 4-bets. Oh, it looks like we would have flopped a straight here. Okay, so right now we can see that Gopa's going to win this hand, and he 3-bet an under the gun raise with Queen King suited, and then the 4-better, who's now been eliminated, had Ace King offsuit. So we definitely want to make a note on Gopa and just say that he 3-bet an under the gun raise with Queen King suited. This is going to help us later on if we get into any hands with this guy, and is definitely going to expand our calling range if he 3-bets, and as well as our 4-betting range. And you guys can see that I haven't even played a hand yet, but already I've got notes and I'm really observing what's going on at the table, and that's really important at these 9-man games. It really, anytime you are sitting at the poker table, you should be paying attention to all the hands, and you really shouldn't be on your phone or watching TV. That's really just going to take away from your game and lower your win rate. Okay, there was an under the gun min raise from Gopa, and now polarizing and Mucknuts called the raise, and then polarizing 3-bet, and both Gopa and Mucknuts called. Wow, so there's a pair on the board, also straight possibilities, and polarizing, bet about 2/3 of the pot on the river. Wow, so yeah, he had a full house here, and really, I don't think he's making that bet with an over pair, queens through aces. It's pretty much always straights and full houses, and really heavily skewed towards full houses since he was the 3-better out of the blinds to the under the gun raise. And I was mentioning paying attention to every hand. Not only should you pay attention to every hand, but you should really try to guess the holdings of every player as the hand progresses. That's really going to really elevate your game to another level and help you when you're actually involved in the hand. Okay, we've got ace-9 offsuit, which will be playable. We will come in for a raise if it's folded to us, and if anybody opens, we're just going to fold. At this early stage, I like to raise anywhere between 2.5 and 3 times the blind. We've got 50 big blinds right now with 1,500 chips at 1530, so I think coming in for about 80 or 90 is good here. Okay, we got 1 call, nope, 2 calls, and we did hit an ace. This is a board that we definitely want to continue on the flop because there are a number of draws out there, including straight draws for those people that have Broadway cards, and then also spade draws. And we've got 2 opponents in the hand, so I think we want to put about a half pot size bet out there. I'm going to bet 135 and see what unfolds here. Okay, Queen came on the turn. This is a little bit of a dangerous card, not because I think my opponent has ace-queen very often, but it's certainly possible that he had Jack-Queen, Jack-Queen of spades, Queen-10 for now 2 pair. I don't think we get a whole lot of value in betting again from worse hands, so we're going to go ahead and check and just see how he plays this hand. Okay, this is an interesting spot because he's betting half pot here, and he could be doing this with straights, he could be doing this with 2 pairs, he could even be doing this kind of with a strangely played ace-king, or certainly ace-jack that doesn't want to get outdrawn. So I think we're going to go ahead and muck here because I don't really see him putting that bet in with something like ace-7 or ace-8 very often. It's possible that he's putting that bet in with a pair plus flush draw type of a hand, but still relatively deep stacked for this turbo. I don't think that's worth risking our tournament life to call that turn bet because when we call that turn bet, he's undoubtedly going to be bombing the river, and that's both with his missed draws as well as his value hands, all of which beat us. So we don't want to put ourselves in that type of position to be essentially calling off our stack on the river there. Now, we didn't have to lead out there with ace-9 on that ace-10 spade deuce board. There is something to be said for checking and calling there, especially against more aggressive opponents, but we didn't have any type of read on these opponents that they were especially tricky or especially aggressive, so I tend to take kind of the standard approach there and think that we will get called with some 10x hands, and we are going to charge them for their straight draws and flush draws. So that would be kind of the standard way I would play that hand. Okay, the blinds just went up to 25.50, so we are about at 25 big blinds here. And keep in mind, we are playing a turbo tournament, so a 25 big blind stack in a turbo is, plays more like, 35, 40 plus big blind stack in a regularly structured tournament. So we have plenty of chips to work with. We're not in dire straits at all here with 25 big blinds in a turbo. I think that's pretty important to keep in mind because time after time I've seen players make unnecessary plays and gamble unnecessarily in these turbos when you really do have more time to wait than you'd think. Okay, we've got 9-6 here in the big blind, and I was hoping we'd get to see a flop, but the button came in for a raise, so we're going to go ahead and fold. Now is when we're really going to want to pay attention to these guys in late position that are seated to our right, and how often they're opening, because that's really going to help us know when we should be shoving over top of their raises as the blinds go up, and that's really important in these turbos. Okay, we just saw a 3-bet from A Webb after table legs limped. And I think we want to make notes here on both players because it is kind of a non-standard limp to be limping there from the cutoff. So let's just make a note of that. And we're also just going to make a note that A Webb isolated that limp from the button. And it looks like he had queens. So I think it's, to me, much more interesting that table legs decided to limp pocket tens there from the cutoff, almost kind of trapping with that hand, but it's not really quite strong enough to trap with, and you can put yourself in some difficult spots post-flop where you don't get a lot of chips in the pot unless you're behind. So I don't really like that limp at all by table legs. You're not making it easy for someone to come over top of you, with the re-raise, which you'll, probably gladly call or get your chips in with. So I don't like that. Okay, we've got a min raise from Gopa under the gun, and then a call by a web in the cutoff, and then both blinds have now come along. And everybody checks the flop, and that kind of tells me that Gopa, the under the gun raiser, might have a medium pair, might have something like ace king, something where he thinks that this board is not great for him, and betting is not going to have a high success rate. Now it is interesting that Gopa won that hand after checking the flop and then continuing on the turn when the flush draw came in and a straight draw came in as well. So it's definitely possible that he had a flush draw and didn't want to bet it and get raised off of it. And it's also possible that maybe he flopped a set of queens or something like that, and then once the turn came and the board got scarier, he wanted to play his hand much more quickly. I think also another real possible hand that Gopa could have had there would have been like ace queen with the ace of hearts. So top pair, top kicker, with still some outs for the flush on the river there if he ran into a better hand. Okay, now the blinds have gone up to 50, 100, and we have a stack of 1180, so we've got just over 11 big blinds. Now if you look around at the stacks at the table, we've got two guys with around 2400 and a stack of 3K, and then a few other stacks that are kind of in our range of 10, 12 big blinds or below. So we still have, even with 11 big blinds, we still have a significant amount of leverage with our stack. Okay, and Doodle Setup Man has raised to 400 out of his 1500 chip stack from under the gun, representing a lot of strength here. Usually when you see inexperienced and amateur players raise to this amount, they either have really big hands or solid pairs that are somewhat vulnerable, so they want to charge others more to play the hand. And let's see what Doodle has. He checked the flop here. He just check folded, so I think a lot of time he can have ace king, ace queen, mostly here, and then sometimes pairs below the 8. Okay, this is somewhat of an interesting spot, and I think a lot of people might just ship here with ace 9 suited. But but we're really not in a great position to do that, and we only pick up 150 chips, so about 13.5% of our stack. It's not really worth the risk of one of these players, one of these other 5 players waking up with a hand. So we can just find better spots, and we don't need to put our stack at risk there with ace-9. I think the probably bottom of my shoving range from that spot with 11 big blinds and a turbo would be, ace-jack and something like pocket 5s. Okay, we have 9-10 suited under the gun, and obviously we're going to fold that hand being the short. Okay, we're now in the big blind with 3-9 suited, so of course we're going to fold if anyone raises the pot here. This is interesting because we could do 2 things here. We could check our option, or we could shove all in. The problem, I don't necessarily think that this player is trapping, but I think the problem with shoving all in is that when he is trapping, 3-9 suited is just so far behind, and that's not exactly a spot. It's just not a great spot for us. If we had something like 7-8 suited, I'd like it much more. Okay, we do have a flush draw here, and he limped in. I don't think he has that many aces in his range. He's oftentimes going to be checking behind the turn, and I'm not calling to float and to now try to take the lead in the hand. I'm really just calling to see if I can get a free card and connect on the river, because I'm not going to be betting here. It's just risking too much of my stack, and we do end up chopping the pot, so that's nice. We're both with 9 high. Too often that player has ace X or king X and may be willing to call us down light on the river. Okay. Honestly, this player, even though he only has 2 big blinds, has played pretty tight since losing with the pocket 10s, and I don't think king 4 suited plays well enough against his shoving range, even having 2 big blinds, to make the call worth it. Also, that represents just over a quarter of our stack, and as we can see, he has ace queen here, and that's just not a very good call to make. So that's definitely not worth risking about a third of our chips in that spot. Okay, let's see what happens here. If it is folded to us, we're going to jam the button, and if there's any action before us, we're not. Alright, so knock on wood, we don't get called. I think usually if polarizing is thinking there, he doesn't have ace high. He could have kind of queen jack, king queen type Broadway hands, and he's calculating whether or not he wants to take that risk for about a third of his chips. Okay, so we picked up about 300 chips to our stack, so we increased our stack about 30%, so that's great. Okay, we've got an all-in by table legs, a call by muck nuts, and then polarizing called with ace queen, and is going to complete the double elimination. Alright, so that's actually great for us because now he's knocked out 2 players, 3 players cash, and there's 6 players left here. So now what we can see is that there's a stack of 4,400, a stack of 3,000, and a stack of 2,100. So I am in that bottom group of stacks with these two guys here. So with that in mind, I'm going to need to take more risks because I'm not, without a chip stack right now, I'm not going to be able to kind of hold on and cash here. I'm going to need to pick up chips in order to cash this single table here. And what's really important to keep in mind, as we only have about 9 big blinds here, is fold equity. If one of the bigger stacks raises, we want to only be reshoving hands of value because we're not going to get them to fold very often, if at all. Okay, 4-6 offsuit is terrible, so obviously we're going to fold that under the gun. All right, we've got ace-jack, and hopefully he can hold on for the win here. All right, so there's been another knockout. And with 5 players remaining, we're in a similar spot here. We've got one guy with a similar chip stack, and then the other 3 players all have significantly more chips than we do. Oh, and that's great. We just got a walk in the big blind, so that's huge for us. Okay, we've got ace-8 suited here. Doodle setup, man, this guy that just raised to 300 has been pretty quiet, and with the stack size that he's raising, I don't think that he's light here very often, and I don't think we're going to be able to get him to fold very often either. So I don't like reshoving in that particular spot. Now, if A-Web opened, I would definitely jam, or if polarizing or A-Web had we're in the cutoff right here and had min raised, I would like shoving with ace-8 suited a lot more. I just think that Doodle, we're not getting him to fold very often, and I think his range is a lot stronger raising from that spot than the big stacks range would be. So, you know, that may look like a tight fold, but I think it's the right fold based on what we've seen from that player and how he's been playing. Okay, we've got king 4 here, and I think this is really close. We pick up a lot of chips here when we jam, and I think this is a decent spot to jam, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. Okay, and we pick up a much needed pot there. Okay, now we've got ace-5 under the gun, and since we just shipped, we're definitely going to be called lighter here. I think an important thing to note when I'm making our decision, and I'm going to go ahead and shove, is that we just shoved, so we should not get as much credit for a hand, and we need to place in the top 3 in order to cash this thing. And each of these stacks has over 3,000, which was over more than double our chip stack. So in a lot of situations, we would not want to push all in there with ace-5, but with the current chip stacks and the dynamic of this sit and go, it's worth taking that risk. Okay, I was about to say this is could have been somewhat of an interesting spot. Jack 5-4 with 2 hearts. If both of these players had checked to us, and let's say another heart came on the turn, or a deuce, a 3, or a 6, those are boards that we could represent much better than these guys. So I might have even taken a stab at the turn there if they both checked. Okay, Queen Deuce is not going to be a hand we're going to want to play here, and it's definitely way too light to be shoving the small blind into this player who's got us covered by a little more than double. Okay, we've got King Deuce offsuit, and there was a raise before, so I was about to say if it was folded to us, I wasn't going to shove, I was just going to fold. It's not worth the risk there, especially with the guy that's got 5 big blinds left in the big blind and is likely looking to get his chips in soon here with what he thinks is an edge. Okay, so this is interesting spot. A-Web raised 4 times the big blind, or excuse me, raised 2 times the big blind, and then polarizing min 3-bet him from the small blind, really showing a ton of strength from that spot. Okay, Ace Deuce. This could be a shove. I don't think it's quite strong enough here from this spot, so I'm going to fold. But it's definitely a spot that you could think about shoving. I think Ace 2 just plays pretty terribly against their calling range, so I'd much rather shove something like 10 Jack or Broadway cards. Ace Deuce we're not going to like. Okay, we've got Ace King. Obviously we're going to get it all in here under the gun. And even when we're called, there's a really good chance that we're ahead in the spot. Okay, we picked up folds, and now we've got about 1,900 chips. Okay, King Deuce offsuit. Obviously, we're going to fold to any kind of raise, especially a raise from early position. Okay, and the blinds are now 100, 200 with a $25 ante. And then we've got a push from the button. So obviously we're going to fold 5-6, and even if it were folded to us, I wouldn't be shoving 5-6 into the largest stack at the table here who can call us off later than anybody else can. This is I think we were in the same spot before. King Deuce plays terribly against either of these players' calling range, and I think that the 203 grind is going to be looking to get his chips in here soon. And so if he calls, we're likely in really bad shape with King 2 there, so I'm going to fold. Okay, this is a really different spot with Queen 10 offsuit, and I like this shove much more because we're dominated way less of the time than shoving King 2 from the button. So that's an interesting spot where our position is worse. Our position is worse and our hand is worse, Queen High versus King High, but it's a much better spot to shove. Okay, we've got pocket 10s, which is a great hand, 5-handed, and we're just going to shove that under the gun, and that gets through. Okay, now this is a really interesting dynamic because Doodle Setup Man, A-Web, and I all have right around the same chip stack. Okay, and I was about to say if A-Web limped there from the small blind. We were going to shove, but he's chosen to shove, so obviously we'll be... I think it's worth noting here that King 5 can certainly be ahead of his shoving range here, or specific hands in his shoving range, but against his overall small blind versus big blind shoving range, King 5 is probably something like 45% or 40%. It's not in great shape there. Okay, we've got 6-4 suited. We're obviously going to fold that in the button. You'll notice that we keep getting in these spots where when we're on the button, the big blind is that super short stack here, the 203 grind. Okay, I don't think I'm going to get tricky here, with a min raise. I like just jamming. I don't think that accomplishes a whole lot. It just lets Doodle Setup Man, the big blind, call more cheaply. But I do think there is something to be said for kind of timing down a little bit to make this look like it was a little more of a tough decision here with pocket tens. And it looked like 203 grind was possibly going to call. He did go into his time bank, and I think at that point, if a player is timing down that much, obviously we're feeling pretty good about our pocket tens, and a lot of the times we're going to be doing better than a raise there in that spot. Wow, that's an interesting call there by A-Web, because he risked roughly a third of his chips there with King 8 offsuit when 203 grind had been playing pretty snug and kind of waiting for hands. So I think that was a pretty bad call on Webb's part in that particular spot. Now, if we knew that polarizing was a really weak, straightforward player, I'd probably just go ahead and limp here, but I've seen him be fairly aggressive, so I think limping in here is really just donating chips to this player. If he knows anything about ICM and shorthanded play, he's going to be putting a lot of pressure on us, and 9-10 offsuit is not a hand that we want that to happen with. Okay. Let's see what happens here. If it's folded to us with King 7 offsuit on the button, we're going to shove. And okay, A-Web goes all in, so obviously we're going to fold now. And the blinds are actually now up to 150, 300. So we have about 6.5 big blinds here, which is not terrible in a turbo. You're really not in big trouble in a turbo until you're probably down around, like 4 to 5 big blinds. Okay, so we've got Ace 9 offsuit here, blind versus blind. We're definitely going to call versus Webb. He's been shoving a lot, and I expect to be ahead most of the time, and we are. Let's hold here. All right, great. And Ace 9 offsuit holds to Webb's Jack Queen, and that's a really standard shove to be shoving Jack Queen on his part. But I think we actually ran into probably the upper end of this guy's shove range, especially because he's been on tilt for a while now and has been steaming. So I think he's going to be shoving a really, really wide range there to put a lot of pressure on us. Okay, so now we're in a much better spot here with 3,800 chips, and now we've got actually Webb just doubled up his stack, so we're really almost neck and neck with the chip leader, and then we've got a couple of guys that have around 1,600 and 1,900 chips. And I didn't talk about this much yet, but this is, it's really good to get the experience playing shorthanded. If you're a big tournament player, if you're able to play a lot of these one table sit and goes, it really gives you great experience for when you do get to those final tables. You'll really be much more versed in the shorthanded play, and those big ICM spots really come up all the time. When you're paying 3 out of 9 in the single tables. Okay, now you'll notice that, and I just folded 8-7 here. The previous hand I had pocket sevens, and I raised to 700 out of about 3,800 chips. And the reason I'm bringing up the hand is that for ICM reasons, if either of the bigger stacks, either the stack that has me covered, really it's just the stack that has me covered because I'd be priced in to call anybody else, but if the stack that had me covered had moved all in, even though I think that I'm ahead of his all-in range, I would be folding there for ICM reasons. Okay, so we have 4-6 offsuit. We're going to call 655 to be winning about 2,000. Now we need really more equity in this pot to call here with 4-6 offsuit. We really need at least 4-to-1 odds here with a hand as bad as that. So that's a pretty standard spot to just fold. Okay, we've got an all-in under the gun, and then a call, all-in by 203 grind, and a call by Doodle Setup Man, and Doodle is at risk here with Ace-King. Alright, Doodle takes the pot and chips up to about 3,900. And that really cripples the 203 grind and puts them all in his big blind. Okay, and we'll fold Queen 9 offsuit here. And Webb shoves all in, and we'll see what both of these players have. So we're really rooting for Webb to take this one down, so we can eliminate a player and be on the bubble here with 4 left. All right, pocket jacks versus queen deuce, and we just have to fade the queen, and we do. Okay, this is a spot where really this is a huge ICM spot. We don't want to bust before Webb, so we're not going to really be putting our chips at risk here without big hands. So I'm really hoping that Setup Man raises. Oops, all right, because Webb's going to shove just a big part of his range here, and he does, and he's chipping up really quickly. So now that he's chipped up to about 2,600, and we have 3,000 chips, that changes things quite a bit here, and we want to play a bit differently now that we're so close in chips there with Webb. All right, now everyone is effectively the same stack here. We've all got around 3,200 chips, so that's definitely going to mean that now we want to play more boldly, take more risks, and the blinds, really mean so much to our stack, so we're going to want to steal more often as well. And you're going to get into these situations in these 9-man turbos a lot, where there's 4 or 5 players left, and really it's those players that are the most aggressive and taking advantage of good spots that are going to be the long-term winners. All right, we've got ace-king suited under the gun, so this is obviously an all-in. All right, we've got 10-5 offsuit. These other 2 players, Polarizing and Doodle, have been playing really weak and not really putting a lot of pressure on anybody. So Webb's really been the aggressor here, and that was nice that he just folded his small blind to our big blind. So I assume that he had a really weak hand there to do that. We're continually picking up really weak hands on the button. We would shove fairly wide here to put pressure since we are on the money bubble, but 210 is obviously way too weak a hand to be shoving here. All right, great. We've got ace-king now again, and there's an under-the-gun shove. In four-handed, we're just going to be ahead way too often not to make this call, and he's got jack-6, so hope for a good run out here. All right, no diamonds. There we go. We faded both the jack, the 6, and the diamond, and we picked up a huge double up. And now we are the overwhelming chip leader, 3-handed, so we're in the money. Okay, I don't really see a point in doing anything here other than shoving all in. Maybe if we had aces, kings, a monster, maybe we'd min-raise to try to induce one of these players to shove over top, but I don't think there's a whole lot of merit to doing that. Ooh, 6s, a7 just rivered a flush on us, so we lost that flip. So that was really a rough spot because we would have gone heads up there with Doodle with about over a 5-to-1 chip lead, so that would have been really helpful to win that hand. I think it is somewhat important to note here that we are really close in chips here with Doodle setup man, and Webb has just shoved here from the button. Normally I'd go ahead and make this call, but I think with the ICM considerations it just makes more sense to fold. Obviously we have no fold equity because we're the ones calling the shove. I think that's just a better spot to fold there. Okay, we've got king 5 offsuit on the button here. This is going to be a shove for us with 6 big blinds, and obviously we're happy about getting our shove through there. Okay, we've got queen jack offsuit in the big blind. Now, Doodle setup man has been really tight, and Webb just went all in. So we were going to fold this hand anyways because of how tight he's been, and now we hope that Webb's ahead here. Ooh. Setup man just hit a 6 with a6 against ace jack and doubled up. So that is a really tough hand for us because we were just about to be getting guaranteed second place money there. Okay, now things have changed quite a bit here. With only 3,000 chips left and how wide Webb's been shoving, Jack King is going to be more than good enough to make this call here. So we're going to go ahead and make this call, now being the third place stack, and see where we're at. Okay, we're up against ace high, or ace six of hearts rather, and we can't improve there with Jack King. So, I'm really happy with how I played this tournament. It's really unfortunate there that our sixes didn't hold to ace seven suited, or else we would have been heads up with an overwhelming chip lead. And you really just, you just need things to go your way, when you're 3-4 handed, and that's really how you win these things. But I do think it was important, even though it didn't end up ultimately working out, it was important for us to make that fold with ace seven when AWeb shipped the button. So even though we are ahead of his shipping range there from the button, with the ICM and with the other stack being significantly smaller than ours, that risk was not worth taking. All right, so I hope everybody enjoyed this broadcast, and maybe you learned something, and you'll tune into my future broadcasts. Thanks.